Korea, the home of K-pop, K-cosmetics, and of course, Korean BBQ. Though Korea is a small country, it's at the center of many cultural trends on the world stage today. One of the biggest cultures that Korea has pioneered over the years is the entire idea of competitive video games. Esports has long since existed in Korea, going much back before even League of Legends existed. 10 years ago, in the days of StarCraft, Korean pro players were already on the scene. Today, Korea is still considered to be the best region for League of Legends. They have won 6 out of all 10 world championships. Most new champion picks and meta shifts are often pioneered on the Korean server. Streamers, content creators, and players from all over the world travel to Korea just for the chance to be able to play on the Korean server. But did you know that the Korean server is infamously the worst and most toxic server of them all? While everyone would probably swear that their region is definitely the most toxic, the people who travel and leave Korea all seem to unanimously agree that Korean toxicity is just on another level. Some pros, some streamers, they even quit League from the pressure that they face. Many go home early from the negative experience, and some even develop mental illnesses from prolonged exposure to Korean SoloQ. Today, we will be talking to and looking at some of the most prominent streamers that have gone to Korea and to understand all of the cultural factors that contribute to the Korean SoloQ toxicity. This is League of Documentary. Today's video is sponsored by Manscaped. Manscaped sent me this awesome package in the mail of all of these cool shaving products that they make. They just launched their new and improved Lawnmower 4.0 electric trimmer for post-COVID summer. It's got wireless charging, it's lightweight, and best of all, it's completely waterproof. So if you want to save time, you can shave in the shower if you wish. It comes with 2 different shaving guards that are both pretty comfortable, but if you're like me and you don't got much grass growing downstairs to begin with, you'll definitely just want to use their bare blade. After trying it, I can say it's definitely very safe and easy to use. You can get free shipping and 20% off with my promo code DONG20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with DONG20 at manscaped.com. Try Manscaped today. Your balls will thank you.
I'm Cowsep. I'm a Master Yi main, and I currently live in Korea. I've been here for 9 years. So basically, I was playing in Korea server for years and years and years, and I got really tired of server culture. I got tired of the culture in the server where players just sell their items, they go AFK, and so when you're playing an NA server, you see a lot of passive aggressiveness. The jungler is ganking top lane again. What's my jungler doing, right? Stuff like that. When you're in EU West, you see a whole lot of flaming and bad things about your mother and all that other great stuff, right? When you're in the Philippines, you get a whole bunch of people just screaming ha 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 in all chat. The other regions are mostly pretty mild, right? Korean League of Legends mindset was to transfer to like NA. NA would have the same exact problem that Riot Korea has right now. I don't feel like Riot Korea is failing to tackle the issues as much as these issues don't exist in other regions, so nobody else is tackling them. If you don't play by the meta, they consider it a loss and they'll just go AFK. They kind of have this mentality of, I'm way better than you, and if I lose this game, you're gonna fall and I'm gonna climb later and you'll never be in this elo ever again. Speaking from my soul, man, the Korea SoloQ, you know, I've been here for years and years and years and years. And when I would rather play on a 200 ping server than to play on 9 ping, it really speaks volumes about what it's become. Like, could you imagine voluntarily playing 200 ping when you could just play 9? It's really unfun to play there right now. And if you look at anybody that's come here to play Korea SoloQ, they come into it thinking they're going to enjoy it. Oh man, it's something new, the best players in the world, they play to win, their mechanics are insane. And everybody that comes here eventually realizes what it is and they're just dying to go home, or they want to go home early. It's very, very rare that you find a player that will actively climb all the way up the ladder and then enjoy being in Korea. You know, if things don't go their way, they basically just throw the game. And as a Master Yi player, that happened to me quite frequently because we don't gank as much as other junglers. Somebody on my stream made a Reddit post about me quitting a game early. And so I went back and I looked at the game, and of course my teammates were AFK. I basically made a Reddit post saying that instead of looking at my behavior, we need to look at the server as a whole and what they're doing wrong and how toxic they are. I feel like they just have this mindset that isn't healthy for the game. the Riot NA saw it, and then they forwarded it to Riot Korea. And instead of having a meaningful discussion about it or fixing anything about it or anything like that, I get notified the next day that I was banned for 30 days for account sharing, and my next ban would be permanent if I was a repeat offender. And then they took the accounts that were in my name, and the ones that I was account sharing, they did not ban them. I don't know why. And then the ones that I didn't account share, they banned. So they banned all my accounts that I wasn't account sharing, and they didn't ban the ones I was. And then like my YouTube videos, I was literally playing like silver accounts on YouTube videos and my student's account. The account in the video in question wasn't my account, and that one didn't get banned either. So like they had no fucking clue what they were doing, right? They were just trying to tell me to shut the fuck up. We were in talks and emails and stuff, and then they just stopped responding to me because the pressure, you know how it was like all over Reddit and stuff and it was getting traction. When the pressure was on, they were making an effort to talk to me, and the moment I fell out of the front page, they just stopped. They just closed all communication and just let it die down. And nothing ever got fixed, right? So we're still kind of stuck in the same issue that we are now. The whole ban situation was really dumb. They gave me a 30-day ban for account sharing, and then they said next offense is permanent. It felt threatening. like yeah, just you can shut the fuck up now, Calcep. Right? That's kind of how that went.
If you look at the average game time in Korea, compared to all the other regions, the average game length is roughly 2 minutes shorter on every single elo. Due to the open mid frequencies, champions that dominate the early game are extremely popular in Korea. If you can take a champion that has a dominant early game and win lane, you can effectively break the spirits of the enemy team and create an open situation early on. If most of your games are going to be decided in the first 10 minutes, then you might as well just play an early game champion. What is the point of picking up a late game champion if you're never going to get to the actual late game? You're not coin flipping your team. You know that your teammates are probably going to go AFK if the early game goes south. They don't want to wait until you get your 5th item. This is why champions like Jace, Renekton, and Lee Sin have always been strong here in Korea. These champions aren't always the most broken in the meta, they're just the most broken against Koreans.
The queue times are much shorter here. We just have a larger player base and our games are short. In NA server, if I'm playing in Diamond 1 Elo, my queue times are like 10 minutes, right? 5 to 10 minutes. It depends on the time of day as well. In Korea, they're like 30 seconds. You're constantly rotating through games. If you're going to grind in Korea, you can grind out like 13 or 14 games in the time it takes 9 or 10 in NA because you're just grinding out that many more games and they're shorter as well. We have this quick roaming meta where people only play meta champions. And if you don't play meta, people are willing to troll you. You'll see a lot of things like that because people are really focused on the LP. They want to get the LP here. Do you remember back in the day with like Feral Flare? So Master Yi was broken. He had like a 50% ban rate. In Korea, they banned him. Never. They never banned him because the champion isn't meta. To them, they only play meta. For example, I'm looking in Korea right now. He has a 0.6% ban rate. Out of that ban rate, I'm willing to bet that most people ban him because he's on their team. That's just what they do. And he has a 3% pick rate. That's rounding up. If you look at NA, he has double the pick rate and 9 times the ban rate and a higher win rate. When we go to Diamond Plus, Master Yi has a 46% win rate in Korea and a 1% pick rate compared to NA, where his win rate is over 50. And he has a 3.2% ban rate and a almost 4% pick rate. Any non-meta junglers would not show up on Korea at all. Korea always knows the best early game champions to play, and their win rates and their pick rates are significantly different than other regions. Like, just look how much I love Lee Sin. Lee Sin has always been a 30% plus pick rate in Korea every single patch almost. Same for Ezreal. Great early game champions that do really well. It's completely different here. In NA, Lee Sin has a 12% pick rate, 16% ban rate. In Korea, he has a 30% pick rate and a 50% ban rate. It's huge. The difference in the metas are huge. Like, it's a completely different game here. Master Yi is not a champion in Korea.
Besides the fact that Korea has a super low ping, this type of culture also contributes to how the Koreans get their amazing mechanics. If most of your games are going to be decided in the first few minutes, then your laning has to be the best of the best. Every mistake, every misstep, every single CS, your opponent is going to be punishing you. He is not trying to just beat you in lane, he is trying to beat your team's spirit down to FF. Unlike a lot of other regions, because all these Koreans accept the early open mid culture, most people are extremely efficient when it comes to opening mid. Korea has a strict culture of conforming. What do other people think of you? Are you fitting into the crowd? Are you doing as everyone else is doing? If everyone else is just opening mid at level 7, then let's make sure that it is the fastest, most efficient open mid that can possibly be. While in other regions, there's usually 1 or 2 other people that want to play things out or encourage their team to at least go until 20 minutes, Koreans make sure that when you open mid, you're not just opening the mid lane, you're opening your teammates' assholes to get fucked harder by the enemy teams. Koreans are basically all speedrunners playing for any percent open clear. Online harassment is nothing unique to any single region. Just as the internet allows everyone around the world to be able to connect to each other, it also allows the degenerates of the world to harass anyone they want in the world. But unlike a lot of other places, in Korea there's real life consequences to online trolling. If you shit talk somebody's family in Korea, then there's a pretty good chance that you won't be seeing your own family for a while. Back a few years ago when T1 was struggling during one of their regular seasons, Faker was under a lot of fire. Although Faker is still considered to be the greatest of all time in terms of esports League of Legends, during the years that he wasn't performing, many fans did not let up on him. And one of those fans sent this nice donation to Faker during his stream. Now, when you do something like this in North America or Europe, most of the time, nothing's going to really happen. You might get banned off Twitch, you'll probably get some messages from other fans calling you an asshole, but at the end of the day, you're not going to suffer any serious consequences. When this incident occurred in Korea, there was a massive public backlash. Most of the time, pro players and teams don't go for the option to sue regular people. It's generally just easier to ignore these people and move on with your life. But due to public pressure, T1 actually ended up suing the person who sent this message. There is no public record of what that person suffered from this lawsuit, but the laws of Korea state that a cyber insult can result in up to a single year of prison time, along with a $2,000 fine. This is roughly the same amount as a single month's wage in Korea. For the penalty of cyber defamation, you can spend up to 7 years in prison, along with a $50,000 fine.
A lot of people don't know this, but everything in Korea is basically tied to your identity. Like when I go to a restaurant, I have to scan myself in to track COVID. So they know who goes to what restaurant. My video game, they know who I am. They know my ID. They can tell if you're account sharing. They can tell all those things. So when you do something that is slanderous, then yeah, they know who you are, right? Everything you do is tracked, right? CCTVs everywhere and all that other stuff.
For most normal people, a stiff fine and the threat of going to jail is enough to deter any form of online harassment. But when it comes to crazy and mentally ill people, they don't really give a shit about the consequences of reality. Unfortunately, Korean fandoms are known for some very crazy behavior. K-pop fans are notoriously one of the most toxic fandoms in the world. K-pop idols are known to not be able to date people because their fans could become upset. When LS was rumored to become one of the coaches for T1, Korean online harassment went far enough that he had to delete his Twitter because his own grandmother was being harassed by Korean fans. This is not to say that the Korean culture is the result of these crazy people. You will find crazy in every country, and mental illness does not racially discriminate. The main problem in Korea is the way that mental illness is handled. America certainly does not have a lack of idiocy and insanity. From the Twitch viewers who swat their favorite streamers, to sports fans who commit acts of vandalism when their team loses a game, the main problem with getting people who need help treatment in America is the American healthcare system itself. The privatized healthcare system is so profit-driven that most people who are not employed simply just don't have any type of insurance. And when it comes to mental health, most people, even with jobs, are not insured in this field. So most people who want to see a therapist will have to end up paying out of pocket for such treatment. In Korea, it's a completely different problem. The state actually sponsors many mental health facilities. Treatment is free and drugs are easily affordable. But the problem is the Koreans themselves. Asian culture generally still looks down on mental illness. Unfortunately, when you talk about things like depression or anxiety, it is not something that people will ever take you seriously for. Most people will avoid any sort of discussion about mental health in fear that they will look weak or look sick to their peers. You have depression? Oh, just cheer up. Anxiety? Just stop being nervous. Insomnia? Oh, all you need to do is go to bed earlier. Man up. Deal with it. When you ask pro-Koreans, how do I win more games of League of Legends, the simple advice of get good is rather common. And when it comes to the Korean culture of mental illness, if you ask them how do I solve my mental health issues, the response of get stronger is probably not that uncommon.
Back in the day, I was one of the people that didn't really believe too much in mental illness when I was in high school, right? But actually, when I came over to Korea and I started playing Korea SoloQ full time, I actually ended up developing my own mental illness, which was anxiety disorder. And that really helped me understand what was going on in terms of like mental illness and who has it and what they're going through. Mental illness isn't something that's widely discussed here like I've seen in the States. I know that like if I browse my Twitter feed or whatever, there's a lot of talk about depression or their anxiety, and you don't really see that in Korea. In my years here in Korea, I've never had a Korean person talk to me about their anxiety or depression. But when I talk to foreigners, it's quite frequent. I could totally see how, even though it is easy to get treatment here, that perhaps these individuals don't feel comfortable talking about the illness. So a lot of people mention how the quick, fast games of Korea server are driven by PC rooms. In fact, I see a lot of people mention this all the time, and I don't think that's the case. PC rooms, yeah, you have to pay to use a PC, right? But I mean, you're paying to use a PC at home too with your electricity and all the other stuff. But other regions as well also use PC rooms as one of their main ways of playing. For example, Philippines, they all use a lot of PC rooms. When COVID hit, they lost a lot of player population on their games. Vietnam, they also use a lot of PC rooms. When I went to both those countries, I got to experience a PC room culture firsthand. It's very similar to Korea, but they do not have the rates of quitting in game that the Korean server does. So I think that this is a cultural issue in terms of quitting the game. They call it the quick quit culture, right? If you look at their elevators or whatever, you'll see that the close elevator button is like losing paint and stuff because people just spam the button. They feel that the games, if they're going to be lost, it's wasted. Just go ahead and end 15, 20-minute game. It has nothing to do with PC rooms, as a lot of people seem to think.
So, what actually contributes to this type of behavior? Are Koreans just naturally more toxic? Do passions run hotter in K communities? Does Kim Jong-un have some sort of secret technology that makes South Koreans act like assholes so he can claim that North Koreans are better? It is because of the South Korean work culture.
A lot of it has to do with the difficulties that they face outside of the game. So I was a teacher for 2 years before I became a streamer. I got to see firsthand how stressful it is to be a student in Korea. The high schoolers, for example, will stay inside all day until 10 p.m. And then if they don't perform like that, then, you know, they have peer pressure from other people. Oh, you got to get into the best universities. Like in the States, I would finish school at 3 or 4 and I'd be done, even in high school or whatever. But in Korea, you're expected to continue to perform. And a lot of these frustrations come into League of Legends, and it has a lot to do with the culture for the younger individuals. Now, I'm not saying the culture's bad. It's just different from what we experience in like the United States, right? It's just very, very hard to be a student here in Korea. League is an escape for them, and they don't want to be stuck in a 30 to 40-minute game. And so they feel like they give up. From like, as an NA player, we consider this toxic, but I don't think it's toxic. I think it's just kind of how the game's developed. When we're talking trolling, I'm not talking like insulting. We're talking trolling like running it down and selling items and just trying to make the enemy win. They'll just do whatever they can, right, to make you lose.
When you're a student in Korea, although school hours are roughly the same as the ones we have in America, most students have teachers and extra work after school. The private tutor business in Korea is a $20 billion industry. Some of these test tutors are worth tens of millions of dollars. All of these guys are doing this in the preparation of a single test called the suning. The suning is essentially the Korean SAT. It determines whether or not you'll be able to go to university and determines which university you'll be able to attend. But the most strange thing about the suning is that you can only take it once per year. So due to this fact, it is so much more important. Korean culture is very, very competitive. What did your neighbor get? How did your friends do? How did you do compared to the national average of top students? There is a massive amount of peer pressure and societal pressure to perform and to study harder. It doesn't matter if you did your best, it matters if you did better than everybody else. In America, if a student is caught sleeping in class, then the teacher usually addresses it very publicly, spends time during the class, and makes a big fuss out of it. But in Korea, there are sections of the class that are pretty much always asleep. This is so common that some teachers actually make rounds around the school in order to wake their students up. This is a K-pop song made by one of Korea's top tutors. It is designed to get students to study harder for their suning. But there was one lyric that really stood out to me throughout this entire song. When you start considering sleep as a reward rather than a necessity in being a functional human being, then you know something is definitely fucked up with your system. The reason that Korea takes its education so seriously is because of its history. After World War II and the Korean Civil War, Korea was an extremely poor country. Most Asian countries at that time were considered all to be developing nations. But just in a few decades, they've been able to become the world's 12th largest economy thanks to their dedication to hard work and education. But that doesn't mean these things don't come at a cost. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD, conducts surveys on 38 of some of the world's most developed countries. It essentially measures the general quality of life that these countries have. With a strict focus on education, South Korea has been able to place 4th in the global PISA rankings. So many South Koreans will simply tell you that this is just the price of being one of the best. But that is absolutely not the case for the other countries that outrank South Korea. Canada and Finland both rank higher than South Korea. Finland is infamous for short school days and long breaks. And speaking from personal experience, the only time I ever lost sleep at a Canadian school was when I stayed up too late to play more League of Legends. The fact is that the Asian education system focuses so much on grades and marks and scoring high that they forget about the most important thing when it comes to learning. You have to make people actually enjoy learning shit. This is a Korean alternative school. It follows similar principles to the Western schools that we have here. Here's what one of those students said about his teachers. "I really love that my teachers treat us like human beings. Like human beings. That is the threshold for being a good teacher in South Korea. I love that my teacher treats me better than a plantation owner treated his slaves." South Korea's economy may have grown rapidly in the last few decades, but that does come at a human cost to the Korean people. South Korea has one of the most stressful work environments in the developed world. In countries where people have extremely poor work-life balance, people are more unlikely to have kids. As a result, South Korea's birth rate has been slowly declining over the years and could face a population crisis in the next few decades. This is a chart of South Korea's birth rate. It is ranked lowest to highest. But what's interesting about this chart is, ironically, it's also ordered from biggest cities to smallest cities as well. The bigger cities often demand more overtime from its employees. The more stressful the environment, the less likely people are to have kids.
그러면 교제하시고 싶은 생각은 있으신가요?
있긴 있는데 시간이 워낙 없으니까
일이나 그런 게 더 우선순위가 되다가 보니까 시간이 나지 않는다거나
연애를 하려면 그래도 군대는 갔다 와야 되지 않을까라는 생각도 있고 해서
에서 한창 열심히 해야 될 때라고 생각을 하고 있고요.
Korea is ranked in the bottom 3 for work-life balance by the OECD. Korean work culture has the same problem that Japanese work culture has. You have to appear to be busy. Appearing to be busy is more important than taking a break.
You were kind of expected to sit there and act like you're working until the boss left, right? So, yeah, you see a lot of that. I just wanted to leave at 4:30 every day, but sometimes I would have to stay as well. And then they had these dinners. I would be expected to go to dinners like once every 2 weeks, or something about that, once a month, once every 2 weeks. I would go to dinner with them, and then you would have to drink, right, to the same level as your boss, right? You kind of follow your boss. And then during summer vacation, when there's legitimately no students, right? Nobody's in the building, I still had to go to work, and I had to sit at my desk and act like I was doing something. So that was a lot of time spent working. And so a lot of it has to do with appearances and looking like you're working. And the work culture it's kind of toxic. It's a little bit toxic. I kind of understand why it is the way it is, but the fact that, you're kind of at the mercy of your boss, it's like, think about, you're in a company. Do you want everybody to go out, sit on a really long table, and then just sit there and watch your boss get drunk and get peer pressured into drinking? Is that something you want to do? I mean, some people enjoy it, but I personally didn't want to go to the dinners most of the time. To spend my free time, like, that's my free time, right? If you're in the system, you're trying for years and years and years and years to become vice principal or principal. You have to go because you have to keep yourself associated with the boss. You have to keep yourself in this position, right? You have to be liked amongst your peers. So these dinners are quite important for upping yourself within the workplace. It's just really weird because, you know, when Americans or whatever, they talk about their boss or whatever, their boss feels kind of not an active part of what they're doing until they need to get approval from the boss. But in Korea, the boss is like always watching, all seeing. You have to go eat with him. You have to stay on his level while drinking. Everything goes through him. You know, it's just, it feels very boss centric here. So everybody wants to become the boss and everybody respects their elders. And they have, even in the Korean language, they have ways of referring to people that are older than them or higher in status than them, and those are all really important to them. So there's a definite hierarchy where you have to respect your boss. You have to. I love Korea a lot, which is why I never moved. You know, a lot of the things that result in negative things also result in positive things. The people here are really, really nice. The game is where you start to see like the bad side of people. The game is their outlet of where they release their negative behavior. In person, people are very respectful, very nice. I never really saw any of the negativity that I did when I was like living in the States. I come from Indiana, right? I've seen like drugs on all of my friends and the way they talk and all these other things. And in Korea, everybody's very polite, keeps themselves. Drugs isn't a thing here. They're hard workers, but you know, that could be debatable whether that's a good or a bad thing, right? Like how the companies are treating them. I mean, overall, the country is fantastic. I like it a lot.
Drugs are illegal in South Korea. Even soft drugs such as marijuana is heavily shamed in countries like South Korea. When it comes to the drugs of their choice, Koreans have two main ones: drinking and League of Legends. League is their drug. It's their escape. It's what they use to relieve themselves of all the other stressful shit in their lives. So it's not really a surprise when Koreans can seem a little bit more toxic than the other regions. They're releasing all of their pent-up frustrations onto this one game. If a Korean child is able to make it onto a pro team, that means he likely doesn't even have to take the suning. He doesn't have to go through all the traditional stressful routes of having to go into a Korean company and going to college. Faker was only 16 when he made his LCK debut. If you're able to become a professional Korean player, you'll probably make more money and have more options throughout your life. Winning in League of Legends isn't just a mental escape from their stressful lives. Winning could mean a permanent escape from the painful road that lies ahead of them.